This video is going to show us how to do 6-2, the planning for adjustment entries on a worksheet. So basically, when a business pays cash for an expense in one fiscal period, but the expense is not used until a later period, we have to make what is called an adjustment. So the expense should be recorded in the same fiscal period that it's used to produce revenue. For example, Delgado Web Services might buy some supplies in large quantity in August, but some of the supplies are not used until September. Only the value of the supplies used in August should be reported as an expense in August. So that's a new term that we have as adjustments, which changes are recorded on a worksheet to update the general ledger accounts at the end of that fiscal period. So what does all this mean? Here's an example of the supplies adjustment. In fact, we're going to do two different adjustments in this section, one on supplies and one on insurance. So on January 1st, before adjustments, the balance of our supplies is $620. And the balance of supplies expense is 0. On January 31st, the supplies on hand are counted and the value of unused supplies was $90. The value of supplies is calculated as follows. We take the beginning of $620 and we subtract the value of the unused supplies of $90 and we get $530. So supplies account minus supplies on hand equals the supplies used. So basically we have to then make an adjustment for that $530 to account for that adjustment. So these are the 4 steps down here, the 4 questions that you should ask. What is the balance of supplies? What should be the balance for this account? What must be done to correct the balance? And then what adjustment must be made? So all we are basically doing in the adjustment column is putting in how much we used during that period. How much of the supplies did we actually use in that period? So here's our 6-2 work together problem. And it says on April 30th of the current year, Fix It Now has completed the trial balance of the worksheet. We're going to analyze the adjustment information given into the debit and credit parts and record it on the worksheet. And then we're going to total them together. So we have 2 adjustments at the end of the month for supplies and for prepaid insurance. So what they are telling us is we did a physical inventory or a count of all the supplies that we have on hand. And it shows that we have $75 worth of supplies on hand right now. If we look at our supplies on the worksheet at the beginning, it was $228. So we're going to take our calculator and we're going to take the $228. So the $228, and we're going to subtract the amount that's on hand of $75, and we're going to get $153 of the amount that we actually used during that period. So that's what we have to make the adjustment for, is what did we use. So again, it's just the beginning, 228 minus what is on hand. We always do the debits first and then the credits, so to make this adjustment, we have to go down to supplies expense and record it in the debit column for the adjustment of $153. And we always have to have one debit and one credit. So the debit was supplies expense because that amount of supplies that we used turns into an expense for that month. And then we have to credit the supplies to show that those supplies are no longer there. We started with $228. We only have $75 on hand, so we used $153. So we're crediting that amount. Now we're going to go up here and look at the value of prepaid insurance, and it tells us that we have a value of $250. So we bought our insurance policy, and our insurance policy right here under prepaid insurance was $375. What we have on hand is $250, so we got to find out how much did we use. So we're going to get that calculator out again. We're going to take the beginning of $375. We're going to subtract the $250 on hand, and we're left with $125. So that's the amount that we use for our adjustment. So we go down here to insurance expense. All expenses are debits, and we have to put in that $125 for our insurance expense because that amount that we use turns into an expense. And then we credit the prepaid insurance for that same amount, $125. And then we're going to add those debits and credits together, and they should obviously match because they're the same amounts in each one. And we should get $278 for the debit and the credit. And that is all we have to do for our adjustments. We always have one debit and one credit. The debit is always the expense, so supplies expense or insurance expense, and the matching credit is supplies and prepaid insurance. So that concludes our 6-2 work together. Go ahead and do the on your own problem.